Walking away from someone to whom you once gave your heart never feels like an act of power. At least, not at first. It feels like a funeral. A silent one where the other person doesn't even realize what they've lost until much later. You doubt yourself. You wonder if it ever really meant anything. But here's the truth. When a woman walks away, not out of revenge, but for peace, a crack opens in a man's psyche. Even if he doesn't show it, it happens. Carl Jung believed that every relationship is a reflection of the inner world. When a woman leaves, she doesn't just leave the man, she breaks the mirror he used to see himself. And many don't realize what they've truly lost until that mirror is already shattered on the floor. Even if you're alone right now, half listening, let this video play. Jung taught that the unconscious is always listening. So whether you're cooking, walking, or lying down, your mind will absorb what it needs. Don't worry about catching every word. The message will still find you. And if you've ever walked away from a man and wondered what he truly felt, beyond ego, pride, or silence, this video is for you, because underneath that surface, there's far more than you think. If this message resonates with you, consider subscribing, not because you owe me anything, but because you deserve a space that honors what you feel, what you give, and what you choose to release. An ego feels the collapse first, not the loss. When a woman walks away, the first thing a man feels isn't sadness or love or even loneliness. It's his wounded ego. That's what breaks first, not his soul, but his sense of control. Carl Jung said the ego is the image we present to the world. It's who we think we are or who we want others to see. And in many relationships, especially when the man hasn't done inner work, his value is based on how much power he has over your emotions. As long as you keep replying, explaining, trying, he feels safe, not necessarily loved, just in control. That's why when you finally walk away, when you fall silent, stop insisting, stop being available, you don't just interrupt his routine. You shake the foundation of who he believes he is. The male ego often confuses availability with approval. If you're still there, he believes he still matters, that he's still desired. But your absence says something else. It screams that he no longer revolves around your emotional universe. That awareness doesn't hurt him yet. At first it irritates him, it wounds his pride, it makes him feel defeated. He may act like he doesn't care, become cold, distant, maybe even sarcastic. But that reaction isn't strength, it's defense, it's a mask. Because deep down, he's realizing something. He no longer has access to you, and he doesn't know what to do with that. Most men aren't taught how to handle emotional grief. They're taught to win, to take, to control. So when a woman leaves, not with drama, but with calm, she deactivates all his strategies. There's no argument to win, no conversation to dominate, no ground to take, only silence. And that silence breaks the illusion that he was ever in control. That's where real change begins. He may not call it loss yet, but inside, something is collapsing. And it all starts when the role he's been playing breaks, especially if he once felt like a man because of your love. Because now he has to ask himself, who am I without her validation? And that question haunts him more than he'll ever admit. The shadow awakens when you're no longer there. Carl Jung introduced the concept of the shadow, that unconscious space that holds everything we deny in ourselves, insecurities, fears, wounds, or emotions we were taught to repress. For many men, the shadow stores the things they learned to hide: neediness, vulnerability, shame, the feeling of not being enough. While you were there, loving him, calming him, holding space for his silences, his shadow stayed quiet, asleep, silenced by your presence. But the moment you leave, the shadow wakes up. Why? Because you're no longer there to cushion what he didn't want to feel. Your absence removes the escape route. He no longer has a place to dump his emptiness. There's no instant comfort. And then he begins to hear himself for the first time in a long time. That's when the, why did she leave? Why couldn't I take care of her? What part of me pushed her away? Start to surface. And even if he tries to distract himself, even if he talks to others, even if he posts as if nothing happened, your silence lingers like an echo that follows him everywhere. He doesn't miss you out of need. He misses you because his shadow is speaking for the first time. And that voice isn't sweet, it's brutal. He may not say it out loud, but he feels the difference. He knows what he lost wasn't ordinary. And even if he tries to convince himself otherwise, deep down he knows you were his chance to grow, to love from a different place. And he didn't take it. Jung said the healing process begins when we face our shadow and stop projecting it. Sometimes the only moment a man sees his shadow is when a woman leaves. It's not a pretty process. It's raw, humiliating, but it's also necessary. Your silence becomes revelation. And when he's left alone with what you used to hold together, he realizes how much of himself you carried in your hands. Third, regret doesn't arrive quickly. It comes silently and late. When a woman walks away, many believe a man will feel regret right away. But regret isn't loud. It doesn't scream. It isn't immediate. And for most men, it doesn't come in the dramatic moment. It comes later when everything is quiet. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious mind needs time to reveal the truth. The ego, by nature, resists. It clings to pride, to excuses, to "it wasn't that bad," to any mechanism that avoids looking inward. That's why, right after you leave, what shows up first isn't guilt or mourning, it's distraction. He fills the spaces you left. He goes out, posts things, talks to other women. He tries to prove, mainly to himself, that he's unaffected, that he doesn't miss you, that he's moving on. But regret isn't impressed by appearances. It waits. It waits for the noise to fade, for the compliments to cool down, for him to realize that this new girl doesn't understand him the way you did. It waits for his phone to stop ringing, for him to be alone in his house, staring at the ceiling, and suddenly he hears that song you loved or walks past the street where you used to walk together. And that's when he feels it, not as a sharp pain, but as a deep emptiness. He doesn't miss you on the surface. He misses your energy, your calm, your loyalty. He misses the way you understood him, even when he didn't know what he was feeling. He misses what you built with him, and he starts to remember how you took care of him, how you believed in him even when he didn't believe in himself. But here comes the hardest part. By the time he realizes all of this, you've already started to heal. You've rebuilt your center. You've grown in your absence. You've created a life that no longer revolves around him. That's why for him, regret doesn't feel like, "I want to come back." It feels like, "I can't go back anymore." Like watching a door slowly close, knowing he'll never be able to walk through it again. Jung said the human soul only changes when the pain of staying the same exceeds the fear of changing. And that's what regret does. It forces him to see that he didn't lose just anyone, he lost you. And in doing so, he also lost the chance to grow with you. That's why regret doesn't scream. It settles deep down and never leaves.
Fourth, your absence becomes a mirror of his inadequacy. One of the hardest truths Carl Jung revealed is that we don't see the world as it is. We see it as we are. That's why when a woman leaves, she doesn't just leave an empty space, she leaves a mirror. And that mirror doesn't reflect him as he pretended to be. It reflects him as he truly is.
At first, he might look into that mirror and see nothing wrong. He might still hear his ego. She was too sensitive, too intense, too demanding. But over time, that mirror becomes clearer. Because the longer your absence lasts, the more he starts to realize that the problem wasn't you. It was you who held things together, who waited, who endured more than you should have. And what that mirror shows him isn't easy to face. The times he ignored your needs, the moments he pulled away when you only wanted connection, the promises he never kept, the emotional fear he refused to work through while you stayed, still trying. This is where shame appears, and Jung said shame is a great teacher. It's not just that you did something wrong, you weren't enough. Even if that's not entirely true, the feeling cuts through, especially if he ever felt more like a man, when you admired him, when you pushed him forward, when you believed in him more than he believed in himself. Now, without your gaze, without your support, without your trust, he's exposed. And he faces the most uncomfortable question: why couldn't I become the man she saw in me? At that point, many men start to remember, not the big things, not the trips or the gifts. They remember how you looked at them when you opened up. They remember your calm voice when they were in crisis. They remember how you were there, and they weren't. And that hurts, not as loss, but as failure. Jung taught that when we lose someone who reflected who we could have become, it's not just the absence that hurts, it's the realization that we weren't able to rise to it. That's why he doesn't just miss you, he misses the version of himself that only existed when you believed in him. And now that this version has nowhere to be projected, the only thing that remains is the reflection, a man who had something valuable and didn't know how to hold it. Your absence reminds him, without a word, that you didn't fail. He failed to take care of what was given to him unconditionally. 5. Some men change, most don't. Not every man changes because you left. And maybe that's one of the hardest truths to accept. Maybe you hoped your silence would be a wake-up call, that your absence would stir something inside him, that with time he would realize what he lost, and that it would make him grow. And sometimes it does, but many times it doesn't. Carl Jung believed that the path of transformation, what he called individuation, only begins when a person is willing to face and accept their shadow. And that's not automatic. It requires humility, responsibility, and pain. Above all, it requires courage to stop blaming others and start looking inward. And this is where most men stumble. When a woman leaves, he has two paths: grow or repeat. Some men stop, reflect, begin to recognize the patterns. They understand why they sabotage, why they pull away when they feel real love, why they run just as something becomes authentic. These men don't transform overnight, but the emotional blow wakes them up. They don't want to change to get you back. They change because they realize they can't go on being the same man who let someone like you go. But others do the opposite. They replace quickly, project their emptiness onto the next person, change faces but not consciousness, repeat the same excuses, the same behaviors, the same fears. They tell themselves you were too intense, that you asked for too much, that you weren't all that special. And in doing so, they dim the mirror your absence had left shining. They move on, but they don't grow. Their relationships may look new, but the emotional pattern remains broken. And even if they smile, even if they seem fine, they know they lost something real. Because what you gave wasn't ordinary, it wasn't forced, it was sincere giving, it was patience, it was deep love, and they let it go. So what does he feel when you leave? At first, nothing. Then ego, then shame. And afterward, depending on who he is, either transformation or repetition. Your absence becomes that silent fork in his path. And how he reacts says everything about whether he was ever truly ready to become the man you already saw inside him. 6. Leaving isn't just power, it's proof that you truly loved. There's this mistaken idea that when a woman leaves, it's because she wants to win, that walking away proves superiority, that there's this watch me shine without you energy. And yes, sometimes that's part of the story, but many times the truth is softer and more painful. You didn't leave to prove anything. You left because you had nothing left to give. Carl Jung said that real love is born from deep vulnerability. And when a woman stays through the emptiness, the silence, the contradictions, it's not because she lacks dignity. It's because she truly loves, because she sees possibilities, because she hopes, because she believes again and again, until that giving turns into survival, until staying becomes the abandonment of herself. And that's why when you decided to leave, it wasn't because you stopped feeling, it was because you finally began to feel for yourself. And that decision wasn't revenge, it was healing. But don't confuse that with ease. Leaving after loving with your soul is one of the hardest things a woman can do, because your love was real. Your giving was complete. And what he feels when you leave isn't just your absence, it's the echo of everything you carried in silence, of every moment you tried while he shut down, of every conversation you sustained while he avoided, of every time you bet on both of you while he only bet on himself. He doesn't just lose another woman, he loses the version of himself that you helped build, the version that only existed in the safe space you offered. And when that version disappears, he doesn't just miss you, he misses who he could have become by your side.
Leaving wasn't a power move, it was the final act of a deep love, a love that said, I would have stayed if you had met me halfway. But now it's no longer about what he feels, it's about what you can finally feel, without shrinking yourself anymore for someone who refused to grow. Leaving doesn't mean you didn't love him. It means you finally loved yourself enough to stop begging to be seen.
Carl Jung said, "You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become." And when you leave without hate, without drama, without needing to explain, you choose to return to yourself. Not because he deserves to lose you, but because you deserve to return whole. If he feels something, maybe not now, maybe not in the way you imagined, but the impact is there, growing in the background, resonating in the silence. And that silence you left behind says more than any word you ever tried to speak. So if you've already left, or you're about to, let this remind you of what matters most. You are not the villain for choosing peace. You're not cold for setting boundaries. You're not weak for holding on so long. You're brave for letting go of what no longer wanted to grow with you. If this message touched you, subscribe, not for this channel, for yourself. Because you deserve content that sees what's inside you, that speaks to the part of you that's tired of being strong in silence. And in the comments, tell me, what was it that finally made you leave? And what have you discovered about yourself since you did? Because your story matters, and your healing begins here.